How do you start a movement? Bring a cop car into the middle of it.
Trigger warning, this episode includes descriptions of violence. We are now recording. We are back. We haven't recorded in a little bit. I feel a little rusty. Gotta get into it again. I didn't even write down an intro for us, but I guess what I'll say for our audience is that we're back with Action Hour with Marianne and Steve Erickson, and we're going to take a little break from policy and legislation to have a conversation about civic disobedience, Marianne's arrest record. I don't know if Steve's ever been arrested, but we're going to find out because I'm just curious. And I want to unpack a little bit of what we heard in the first episode from Marianne about the ways in which activism can kind of put you in circumstances where you might be arrested. You know, I have protested a bunch in New York, and there was only ever one time that I was in a position where I possibly could have been arrested. There was an Occupy Wall Street march across the Brooklyn Bridge in 2011, and there were about 700 people that were arrested on the bridge that day. And I was not one of them because I chose not to be. I was like, they gave me the option. And I was like, when given the option, I'm going to choose not to get arrested. But that's why I think I think that's why I'm so fascinated with your arrest record, Marianne. You sent me your arrest record as an attachment to an email, which I thought was so hilarious. It was like you were asking me to ask you about it. So I want to start and just say, you know, what was happening in 1966, 1967, because that seems to be, you know, you sent me in your record, it says fall 1966, arrested, booked and released, trespass, anti-Vietnam War protest, $150 fine, no jail. So let's start there. What was going on there?
Actually need to start a lot earlier.
Really? Okay.
I was 17 at the time, but I graduated high school very early. So I was working as a bank clerk, would you believe, a loan clerk in a bank in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And a friend of mine who was a student at UC Berkeley came down and said, we need you up there. And so I walked out of my job and flew up to Berkeley with her. Mm-hmm. And she kind of left me on the sidewalk and said, okay. And at the time, there was the free speech movement happening at the U. And the kind of leader of it all was Mario Savio. And all of the things that were, you know, all of the planning and organizing and putting together was happening in Mario's apartment. And there were people in and out constantly all day. I'm not sure now how many people actually lived in the apartment, but there were usually 30 or 40 people there all the time. And nobody was eating and nobody was sleeping and nobody was washing their clothes or any of that kind of stuff. So I became their house mother. And which meant, I mean, I didn't have any money, but I hustled up food and I would make great big pots of spaghetti or giant salads or whatever. And I would gather up the laundry that needed doing and schlep it down to the laundromat and hustle up a few bucks to, you know, clean the laundry. And in the middle of all of this, I mean, what the big explosion was that, okay, Ronald Reagan had become governor, and as governor, he was a regent of the university. And as a regent of the university, he ordered that all of those tables where people, you know, handed out leaflets and harangued and talked had to be removed from Sproul Plaza. And The students said, "What? No." So Mario and Jack, and I'm trying to remember his last name now, defied that.
Mm-hmm.
And a cop car came driving into the middle of Sproul Plaza and put them in the car. And suddenly there's 3,000 students all sitting down around that car. And it's very awkward to move that way.
Uh-huh.
So Mario climbed out the window of the car and gave this impassioned speech, which has become, I mean, it was recorded and it has become an historic speech from the roof of the cop car to 2,000 students. And, how do you start a movement? Bring a cop car into the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it was not a plan on my part in any way. My friend just dragged me up there and, what do I do in Mario's apartment? Well, I wash the dishes and I feed the people and I make sure the laundry is done and occasionally get a groupie out of Mario's bed. And then came the sit-in at Sproul Hall, the main building. And that lasted for 3 days. And Mario's lawyers said I couldn't be there because I was underage. So I stayed at his apartment and handled the telephones with reporters calling every 2 seconds, what's going on, what's happening, and incidentally coordinating because the administration and Reagan's office and the cops combined to turn off the water and the electricity in the hall to make it very hard for people to stay there.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
There were people on the outside doing things like bringing in food and hiding in the bushes, and the students would let down ropes out of the windows of the building.
Mm-hmm.
And, anyway, it lasted and it lasted. And I got very, very sleepless for too long. And in the middle of all of this, a woman named Malvina Reynolds, and you should know her name because she wrote some wonderful songs, including about the sit-in. And in 1964, $1,000 was a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Malvina walks in and she writes a check for $10,000 to put toward bail for those students.
Wow.
And 801 students got arrested at Sproul Hall.
Wow.
A friend of ours who's now living on the Kitsap Peninsula, but used to be Elliot's neighbor, was one of the 801 students. And the cops had a lot of fun dragging Mario feet first down the marble steps.
Yeah, that's a horrible way to treat a person. I think it's very interesting to hear you talk about this and start at this place, which is 1964, you said, right? So you were a teenager. But, a very different cause. But what's happening at Columbia University right now?
Oh, it's the same damn thing.
It's the same thing, right? And it's interesting and maybe we'll talk about this later because I have a question about this, but we talked about cycles and the spiral and how things come back around in a different form, all of the time. And it's shocking to see students being treated this way for peaceful protest. It never stops being shocking to me, to see that and that students are being expelled for voicing their concern about the way in which America is behaving.
And they're being dragged off to jail. And basically, yes. I mean, back then it was the free speech movement. It was the idea. I mean, what the free speech movement people were leafleting about was racism in the South.
Mm-hmm.
they had many of them had been in Mississippi, Mississippi summer, and, had gotten beaten up, and they were registering Black voters. And they came back to the university and wanted to make this known.
Mm-hmm.
And, Ronald Reagan didn't want that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And even in 1964, some of them were on to what was happening in Vietnam. I mean, it was already happening, starting to happen. And all of those things, the people in power were not interested in having that be known. And probably if you go back farther, as I've said a number of times, the world starts when you get off the bus. So that's when I got off the bus. But people older than me, our friend and short-time landlady, she got off the bus in 1949 and was part of a communist, cooperative household commune. And her husband disappeared.
Oh, just was never found, it never seen from again or heard from again type?
Right. Yeah. And in fact, what happened at UW and at Berkeley is that the House Un-American Activities Committee made your paycheck, if you worked for the university, and this was for many of them, on the back where you signed, it was the pledge that I am not a communist, I've never been a communist. And if you wanted to sign your paycheck, you had to sign that pledge.
Oh my God. How long was it like that?
Many years.
That is so scary. But it makes sense, right? Like, this is the reason why I want to talk about these things. And the reason why I ask you all to go back in time in this way is because I think it's easy without the knowledge and the context and the history. It's easy to forget things like this. Exactly. Yeah. I'm shocked by that. Right. But I'm also shocked by the current behavior. So it's not, but
what I'm saying is it's the same thing. You see it from one generation to the next, to the next. It's the same kind of behavior, and it's the same. And usually it's white middle-class males, or middle-aged males, I should say. I'm not sure how those people get into positions of privilege and power, but they do.
So we're in 1964. Is when you get off the bus. Is that the way that you would describe it? You were 17 and you got off the bus. Were you still in high school at the time or no?
No, I graduated at age 16.
You graduated early. So you said you graduated early and then did you end up going to school at Berkeley?
No.
No, you didn't. Okay. Okay. You told me that you studied philosophy in college before you got kicked out of college. Where did you study and why did you get kicked out?
Okay. Back then it was called Valley State College or San Fernando Valley State College. Now it is the State University of California at Northridge.
Okay.
Same building, same institution, different name. And to go back even further, shortly before I should have graduated from high school, I got called in by the principal and the vice principal at the same time. The vice principal wanted to talk to me about my part in the graduation ceremony as a National Merit Scholar. Like to parade their National Merit Scholars. The principal, on the other hand, wanted me to confess to, quote, "You know what you did." And I kept
mean
what I did. You tell me what I did, and I'll tell you if I did it or not. So I never found out what you know what you did, but it turned into this huge thing where my parents had to take a day off of work, both of them, which for us financially was a major hit.
Mm-hmm.
And there we are in the principal's office, and we always speak Dutch. We always spoke Dutch together.
Mm-hmm.
And there's my dad saying, "You hang in there, kid. You don't give an inch."
Mm-hmm.
And my absolute tears saying, "Tell them whatever they want." So the upshot was that I was not allowed to graduate.
Ah.
And I lost all my scholarship offers because what I didn't know was that the principal wrote to the college board and said, "Yes, she has the grades. Yes, she has the scores, but she doesn't have the proper citizenship."
That is horrible. Talk about like I mean, didn't ruin your life, but like just the ways in which, I don't know, like people, I mean, yeah, that's horrible. I mean, especially in America where like, and I guess at the time it was different, but scholarships for kids for school, it's a big deal. You're screwing with somebody's future. Yeah.
Oh, no, it totally screwed with my future because I was all set for some reason to go to Northwestern University in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'd been accepted. I had the scholarships. I had everything lined up. And then, you know what you did. And poof, gone.
When you were 17, you were part of this free speech movement, 1964. Yeah. And then you do go to college, right?
I came back to Los Angeles. I mean, the movement kind of disintegrated in 65. Mm-hmm. And so I came back to LA, and went to work. And then in the fall of 65, I enrolled at Valley State. Mm-hmm. And I was a good little student, and I commuted from my parents' house and took courses in philosophy and German and other things. And I joined Students for a Democratic Society, which my parents thought was, that sounds perfectly okay. Mm-hmm. But Students for a Democratic Society became a fairly activist organization.
Yeah.
No, we were what? We were the good guys, obviously. So I must have been one of the good guys. And in the second year, I moved out of my parents' house and ended up in this ramshackle place out in one of the canyons. And that's where I was so we organized various activities, one of which included then the blockade of the front gate of the Van Nuys Air National Guard Base. As one of the things that when I was commuting over the hill from Los Angeles out to the valley in my little underpowered Volkswagen, is that on a at least weekly basis, sometimes almost every day, there would be these convoys of 3 trucks. Each one would have 2 trailers. Each trailer had rows of bombs, giant bombs, 3 across, 5 back, and 3 deep. So there'd be 45 on each trailer, and there'd be 3 of these trucks with these 90 bombs each. And they were going to the Van Nuys base. Mm-hmm. And there is a large hill, small mountain between city of LA and the valley. Mm-hmm. And my little underpowered Volkswagen over there in the far right lane, torching along at 25 or 30 miles an hour in second gear. And their fun thing to do is that one would be in front of me, one would be behind me, and one would be to the left of me. And I'd be boxed in by these bombs.
Oh, my God.
That does a thing to you. Mm-hmm. So when I joined SDS and, we talked about that sort of thing and discovered that those bombs were going to that base. And where were those bombs going? Well, they were flying them over to Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And So that was a part of then organizing. We organized lots of things, demos on campus, handing out leaflets, teach-ins.
Mm.
We bring people, and have events, to teach people what was going on.
Yeah.
And then we did the first blockade, and I didn't get arrested at the first blockade. I kind of stood back and watched the action. What was that about?
Mm-hmm.
But then the second one we did, it was my choice. And we sat there cross-legged in the entrance driveway to the guard base. And it was very interesting. So these are young recruits that they've got in there, and these guys don't know a whole lot. Mm-hmm. And they ordered them to set bayonets on their rifles and then do this march in formation. Is like this, I don't know how many across, but basically covering that whole driveway. Mm-hmm. And it's this really weird, it's not like they're, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's this hop, skip, and then stand, and then hop, skip. It's this really weird way of moving. And these guys are all, hop, skipping, in unison, in formation. And my big concern was that one of them was going to trip on one of our, hands or feet or something. I mean, we're all sitting there cross-legged.
Yeah.
And skewer somebody.
Yeah.
So they managed to make it over the top of us without skewering anybody. Mm-hmm. I mean, there were some stomped hands and feet and legs.
Yeah, but they marched over you. Yeah. Basically. Yeah. Okay.
As I say, it wasn't marching. It was this bizarre hop skip thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But that did not dissuade us. And so then they, started dragging us away. And some people were willing to walk and some had to be dragged off.
Mm-hmm. Did you walk or were you dragged?
Kind of half between. They were not being gentle, let's put it that way.
Yeah. Were you scared?
I'm not sure. In the middle of the adrenaline rush and all these many years later, my biggest concern was those bayonets.
Yeah, right. I mean, you're in the middle of weaponry with a base with a lot more weaponry. Yeah. And in part, we wanted the people in the community to know, because Van Nuys is a bedroom community, in the valley outside LA. Mm-hmm. These are, nice middle class, go to work every day people who had no clue. Mm-hmm. And it was a shock and a surprise to us when they basically vilified us and, threw rotten tomatoes at us verbally. They didn't want to know. Yeah. Okay.
So. Mm-hmm. And in the middle of all this, when they finally turned us all loose and we went back to the location, my Volkswagen had been vandalized. Oh,
really? Yeah. By on purpose? Like by somebody who knew what you were up to? Or?
Let's put it this way. They smashed in the window to be able to get in. They took all the literature that I had in the back seat of the car. It on the roof and set it on fire, and they broke off the mirrors. And the one thing I didn't know until it happened was that they pulled the drain plug on the transmission. Oh, and they flattened the tires. That's right, because one of the professors actually used his credit card to have all 4 tires on my car repaired. Yeah, this was deliberate.
Yeah, that's definitely deliberate. That sounds very much like in reaction to. Okay, so that was the first one. That's the first arrest. Was this particular moment?
Actually, the closest that one was when I got back. I'm looking at my car. I'm sitting there on the ground behind my car going, oh, shit, oh, shit, oh, shit. And a cop comes up and says, you have to move and you can't talk like that or I'll have to arrest you.
Seriously?
Seriously. Oh, yeah. They were so polite.
Oh my God. So you said, oh shit, and he was going to arrest you for cursing?
That part was not clear, but that was the assumption.
All right. So you get off the bus in 64 with the free speech movement. Then you join SDS while you're in school, and you end up being a part of this particular protest and get arrested. And then what happens? Where do we go from here? I know you're on the line, Steve, and I have questions for you, but not yet.
So we all got expelled.
Ah, okay. So you got expelled as a result of this particular protest.
Well, and then the next quarter, they let us back in. We had to promise. I'm not sure what we had to promise, but they let us back in. And that quarter, one of the things that was happening was, oh, come on. Steve, who makes saran wrap and napalm? Dow Chemical. It's been a tradition that colleges have been in bed with the chemical industry and the military industrial complex. Mm-hmm. So they would give Dow Chemical space in the administration building to interview engineering students. When you graduate, you can come to work for us. Mm-hmm. But that was a terrible abuse, and we confronted the administration about it, and they basically told us to get lost, et cetera. And so we ended up saran wrapping the administration building.
Oh.
That takes.
Shrink it.
None of us had any money, so we were all basically shoplifting saran wrap from every market in the valley. And saran wrap came to be in short supply.
I mean, yeah, because it would take so much saran wrap a building.
Yes, it took an enormous amount. We never did the whole building. We ended up just doing the front facade. Mm-hmm. But we covered the front entrance to the building. Mm-hmm. And then, out to the ends and just around the ends there. And it was considered, it was a big deal on campus.
You get a grant to do that as performance art.
I don't know if you can hear him.
No, I can't. What'd you say, Steve?
Nowadays, you could get a grant to do that as performance art.
Yes, you could. But not if it's only if it's about certain issues.
Yeah. Anyway, so they expelled us a second time and said, "This is it. You're not coming back."
Yeah. So while Marianne was doing what she was doing, what were you up to? And also, like, when you said you've been arrested 4 times. I think I heard you say that, but you've never been convicted, right?
Might have been 4 times.
Something like that. And
might have been.
Yeah, might have been. Okay. Huh?
I never really counted.
Okay, you haven't counted, but were your arrests also linked to civil disobedience?
Yeah. So let me kind of think back here. When was I arrested? I went to lots of DC demos, but I never got arrested at any of them except for May Day 1970, which was kind of organized under the rubric of if the government won't stop the war, we'll stop the government. Mm-hmm. Did interesting things like there was these people from Wisconsin who came into DC that morning with a flatbed full of old tires, and they just dropped the sides in the middle of, DC's got all these circles, traffic circles, and they just some of those and they just dropped the sides and the tires went everywhere and brought everything in still and all. But I wasn't in on that one. But pretty much that day, as soon as we hit the streets, they had massive cop presence and National Guard, and they just rounded everybody up. I mean, everybody. They rounded demonstrators. They rounded up government bureaucrats on their way to work. They rounded up all the reporters, put us in DC federal jail where they were pumping. And some people went to the stadium held in DC Stadium, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But I was in a federal jail in a basement somewhere or other. And they were pumping tear gas through the ventilation system. There was about 117 people in a cell made for like something like 16 where I was. And it was, and we were really wondering if they were just going to take us out and shoot us. Because you have to realize this was just shortly after the coup in Chile, which happened there, including at, a large stadium. And we'll get into that bloodthirsty part of America's imperialist past, and present.
Mm-hmm.
But so they had everybody rounded up. I think there was a New York Times reporter in the cell with us.
Mm-hmm.
So after a day or so, wasn't even a whole day really. It was kind of like middle of the night. The ACLU finally got a federal judge to cut us loose because it's basically rounded up everybody. I think it was the largest mass arrest in American history, something like 11,000 people.
Wow.
And, I signed a form, for ACLU to represent me and totally forgot about it until quite a few years later when, a letter that had been chasing me for a while came to me and asked if I wanted the $55 settlement they'd made or something, or would I donate it to ACLU? And of course I said, take it, whatever. So that's kind of my primary political arrest.
Yeah.
Other than the draft, which was kind of interesting, I guess. It wasn't so much that I resisted. I just kind of ignored it after a while. And I even had hopes that, maybe my records had gotten destroyed in one of the Berrigan brothers' raids on draft boards. The Berrigan brothers were these Catholic priests who went around raiding draft boards and pouring blood on the records and burning them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Philip and what's the other one's name?
I cannot remember.
Yeah, I can't remember them, but
Marianne was kind of the leader.
Yeah.
Okay, but there were people. I mean,
but apparently not me, because one day I was back in Baltimore and I was crashing at somebody's place, and somebody kind of gives me a shake early in the morning and says, "There's an FBI agent at the door. Look out the back window. There's two in the backyard. Says he's coming in. Says he's got a warrant. Okay, So he grabs my hand and he compares it to some fingerprint card he's got or something, And of course, I don't know how you could really do that. But
I was just thinking that, that seems very, I don't know how you would be able to ID that actually, but okay.
It seemed kind of weird at the time too. Yeah. But, they dragged me off to federal jail where I sat for a few months. And eventually we kind of...
A few months? You weren't in jail for months.
No, I was in jail for about a month and a half, something like that.
You never told me that before.
Oh, well. Anyway, ultimately we kind of made a deal where I would go take the physical and, either go in or do whatever at that point. So they, took me down for the physical. And the physical was a big deal. Have you ever heard Alice's Restaurant?
No.
By Arlo. Classic piece of American history. You should listen to it, though it's gotten much longer over time.
Okay.
So they take me down for the physical. And I had two broken ribs from fights in jail, and I couldn't lift my elbow past my shoulder at the time. And I still passed the physical, which was kind of weird. But, they gave me these forms to fill out, and I wrote on one of them, if I'm sent to Vietnam, I will regard everything over the rank of sergeant that moves as fair game. And, they're sending me around to the different places to, do the physical and do this and do that. And have you ever smoked marijuana? Yeah, man, you got it. It's been a while, and then, they pulled me out of line and said, "We don't want you." So I get shoot everything over the rank of sergeant that moved were the magic words. Because people did some pretty outrageous things to try to stay out and did not always succeed. So
That's interesting to me, because it kind of reminds me of when people are being regarded as being fit for a jury, and how you like ideologically, if you are ideologically opposed to the process itself, like oftentimes I have a friend who was asked to be, asked to leave a jury pool because he was like, I don't believe in the justice system. And they were like, well, we can't use you. And that's like, if you're going to, I mean,
I would have asked, but which parts of it do you not agree
right,
with?
I know, but it's just, and
they might be really good to have on there if you're a defense attorney. It might be good for prosecution too. You never know.
Yeah, totally.
Speaking as an older person now, one thing that has really struck me as I've gotten older and looked back is how many events that are now considered, historically important I was at. And when you're in these events, you don't think this is historically important. People will be talking about this for decades to come. You're just there, participating, doing whatever. So, I was at the March in Washington in '63.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can see me in those photos. I'm about a half mile back that way.
It's funny.
And various of the demos in DC about the war. And then I went to the Democratic Convention in Chicago in '68.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I knew it was going to happen. It was only Marianne, it was only the very serious pacifist crowd who were surprised by the Chicago cops being Chicago cops. So I got a motorcycle helmet for a friend and I spray painted it white so it didn't look so beat up. Mm-hmm. And I took that along with me, and it was very handy because, at one point during some close quarters events, a cop, went to take his billy club, went to wham me, on the shoulder, and it on the head with the helmet, was, rattled a little bit, but not much. And I punched the cop. And so, those were interesting times for sure.
Well, so can you explain a little bit more about the Democratic Convention of 1968? Because I actually don't understand the significance of that.
You poor naive child.
Talk to me like I'm a baby.
I tell you, teach American history anymore. Okay, so you have to have the background here. World War II, then the Red Scare and the Cold War. Okay, then which both the Dems and the Republicans were into. Then the bright new era of JFK. Then the increasingly dark era of JFK getting shot, getting assassinated, and Lyndon Baines Johnson ascending, who would have gone down as one of the greatest American presidents if it hadn't been for NAM, hadn't been for the. And the war kept escalating and escalating, and at a certain point, LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnston, hey LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? That Johnson. Pulled the plug on his campaign for re-election in '68 and said, I will not seek another term. That threw it open. There already were peace candidates running, Eugene McCarthy being a prominent one, Robert F. Kennedy, the real Robert F. Kennedy, not the guy running around now with that name, was running and posed a real serious threat. But then, of course, he got assassinated. This, for those of us who are increasingly of the mindset that, the system must be overthrown because it will not abide by peaceful change, this did seem to reinforce that feeling, the sequence of events of people just getting assassinated over and over.
Yeah.
So there was a Democratic convention going to happen, and the question was whether it would, the political question was who was going to be the nominee. Was it going to be Vice President Hubert Humphrey, who was, an okay liberal, but again, Lyndon's man and, into the war, Or were they going to let Eugene McCarthy at least have a shot at it or something? So that was kind of on the inside. But on the outside, it was like this was part of the machine that was, killing thousands of people in Vietnam, tens of thousands of people, was engaged in imperialist adventures all over the world, part of a rotten, corrupt system. And so we were going to Chicago to tell those people we don't like it, and to tell the world we didn't like it. The Chicago cops practiced ahead of time with things like having drills where they would chant "kill, kill, kill" as they practiced with their batons. Mayor Richard Daley, an old line, very corrupt Chicago politician, who probably was responsible for JFK actually getting the popular vote in the Electoral College win in 1960, was old line family dynasty kind of thing, kind of politics. Try to give you a flavor of him. So I know, like the night I got in, I had an address for where to go, and I was walking down the street, and all of a sudden some young person comes running by me up the street that way, and Chicago police car comes zooming on from a side street a minute later, squeals to a halt. The cop jumps out with a shotgun, takes a beat on him. He's pretty far gone by now, the kid, way too far for a decent shotgun, and shot, and squeezes one off at him, and then turns around and sees me and proceeds to, and raises shotgun, whereupon I took refuge behind a garbage can and, he squeezed one off at me. Then he got back in the car and drove away. So that kind of gives a tenor of what Chicago was like. The kind of grand finale was, I don't even remember what night it was, but there were, like 10 or 15,000 people for a rally at Grant Park, and they had the National Guard surround it and start tear gassing it and not letting anybody out, which of course caused all sorts of chaos. And of course we, broke out. And then Benson Center, where all kinds of mayhem and, general rioting proceeded. So this was, of course, all televised live on TV because it was the TV era now. 1968 was the real live TV news era.
Well, isn't that, not to sidebar it, but I remember learning in my very limited U.S. history class that, the fact that Vietnam was televised was a big part of the outrage. Like not the only reason, but people could see for the first time, like what was happening on TV, and that like being able to have the visual of all of these things, right? Like being able to visually see what was going on.
On the TV news, and it would be Uncle Walter Cronkite, CBS News, America's uncle, we call him. And, very trusted by everybody. As showing the news from Vietnam, and there'd be the U.S. propaganda flag, the Army propaganda flag, talking about the body count and how many people had been killed. Well, today, we killed 300 more Viet Cong. And then they'd show footage from what was, out in the field, and, like villages burning and screaming, native peoples running around, screaming peasants running around. And, and that happened increasingly as time went on. For example, there's a very famous cover on a Life magazine from then of a little girl who was napalmed running, screaming down a road. The village burning behind. And, it's kind of like with Gaza now, you can try to spin it any way you want, but people are visual beings. And when we see stuff like that, we react. So, I mean, even people who were like totally apolitical, didn't understand any of the politics or history or any of that stuff would watch that on the evening news, and they would just go, this is horrible. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And there'd be some sort of vague mumbo jumbo about dominoes. If Vietnam falls, if South Vietnam falls, then so will Laos and Thailand, and then it'll be Korea, South Korea, and Japan, and then Hawaii and Mexico. And the next thing you know, the communist hordes are, at the door or something.
Right.
This was foreign policy. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but back to the convention of 1968. So you were there, and you prepared for it to be violent. You were aware that it was going to be violent.
Yes.
How did you feel about that? Like, I just feel like it's interesting to have these conversations, to think about my own activism, because I have been in protests a lot. I have been in protests where violence was anticipated, but I've always been able to like avoid it because I don't want to be in the middle of it. And I have friends who would otherwise be very interested in being politically active that way, who haven't gone because of fear of violence and things like that. And I had a friend come with me to a George Floyd protest during COVID, and she was really scared to go because she was like, I don't want to be in a situation where something bad's going to happen. And I told her, I was like, well, I know the mood of the crowd pretty well. Like, I'll make sure we leave before it turns weird, because there's always a point. Oh, not always, but like oftentimes there's a point where you feel the shift, and then unless you're prepared for violence, like you're talking about this specific convention, you you were going up against the Chicago cops, like you knew walking into it that it was not.
The U.S. was really practically in a state of civil war. At that point, I think it was 68. I think something like, was it just hundreds of, for example, ROTC buildings on college campuses were burned.
Mm.
There were hundreds and hundreds of bombings around the country of military, facilities and things. The U.S. was really close to a civil war in a lot of ways at that point. For me personally, I was not a pacifist. Okay. I figured, we're going to have a revolution here, and just based on what I'd seen, transpiring in the South and elsewhere, and what I had read about American history, because that was the first big wave of, I'll call it revisionist American history, where people were analyzing it from a leftist perspective. U.S. academics finally doing that in terms of American imperialism and stuff. And I'd read a bunch of that stuff. And, I could just look at the history. Well, what happened to the coal miners? They brought in the National Guard, they shot them down. Yeah. What happened? You just go through American history, and it's like that over and over and over and over again. It's never been, the historical hindsight is always, things were bad and people got together and held hands and sang Kumbaya, and then everything got better. And it's never actually been like that. Mm-hmm. Certainly the dedication to nonviolence by the civil rights movement in the South was in many ways as much of a strategic decision as it was an ideological decision. Okay. Mm-hmm. Because, King and all the various other leaders were astute enough to recognize that, we need to, we're getting the shit beat out of us all the time anyway, just day to day. We just need to get that on a national level so people all over the country can see what's happening and garner a response on our side. Mm-hmm. So it was in many ways as much of like I say, a strategic decision as an ideological one to have the civil rights movement be nonviolent. Now, of course, at a certain point, starting around 63, 64, that really fractured, and you had, the younger people who were saying, we're going to defend ourselves. We're not going to take this anymore. Mm-hmm. And But that had always been the case, in the South too. I mean, you go to the southern towns and, the KKK knew that, well, if we go mess with Colin over there on that road, he's got a shotgun and he's going to take at least one of us out if we try to screw with him. So we'll just leave him alone. I mean, it's all these kind of personal things always in these situations too. So yeah, there was armed self-defense going on all the time, but it was downplayed and it was not adopted as a program. Now, in terms of getting change throughout the country, in terms of really trying to overthrow the capitalist state, as we were sort of vaguely trying to do, with nobody being able to agree on the ideology or anything, of course, because if you get 3 leftists in a room, you're going to have 5 ideological factions within an hour.
That's hilarious, but also, yes, 100% true. And I think a fundamental issue when it comes to messaging. I'm curious. Okay. Marianne, are you a pacifist?
I have never been a doctrinaire pacifist. I have been committed to nonviolence. There have been a couple of instances when that commitment to nonviolence cost me dearly in getting the hell kicked out of me and almost getting killed. But what I discovered to my own dismay is that if you live a life of nonviolence, then when violence comes to you, you are not able to deal with it. When I joined SDS, I signed a pledge of nonviolence. And for the most part, I have lived by that. And when my son was 10 years old, and I had been a draft and military counselor for years and years. And the draft was still in existence when he was 10 years old. And I sat him down and we had a long and serious talk, and he signed that pledge to nonviolence. And when he was in high school, he was getting beaten up every day by the jocks. And at some point I said, hit him back. And he said, I have pledged to nonviolence. I'm not going to do that.
In times when you've been faced with violence, when standing up for things you believe in, like, I don't know, like, how do you feel about that?
My response is usually righteous outrage. Yeah. How dare you? Do you realize what you're doing? Just, straighten up, fly right. What the hell do you think you're doing here? And I mean, I have done it over the years so much and so often. And now that I'm old and have gray hair, I did it some years ago out at Keystone Spit. I love this. There were a couple of guys, they were obviously Navy guys, and they had one of those great big pickups, and they had driven it right out on the spit and, in places where you're not supposed to. And they were hauling driftwood off the beach and throwing it into the back of their truck. And I marched myself out there and I said, what do you think you're doing? You put that back right now and you get that truck out of here. And they both went, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's like house mother energy, yelling at the boys who are doing the bad thing. I mean, okay. I see a little bit of a through line there. Our outro today is courtesy of Smithsonian Folkway Recordings and Schroder Music Company. Here's activist and folk hero Malvina Reynolds with It Isn't Nice.
It isn't nice to block the doorway. It isn't nice to go to jail. There are nicer ways to do it, but the nice ways always fail. It isn't nice, it isn't nice. You told us once, you told us twice, but if that is freedom's price, we don't mind. It isn't nice to carry banners or to sit in on the floor, or to shout our cry of freedom at the hotel and the store. It isn't nice, it isn't nice. You told us once, you told us twice, but if that is freedom's price, we don't mind.
This podcast is a production of the Whidbey Environmental Action Network and is made possible by our generous donors. Produced, edited, and mixed by me, Amanda Bullis. Special thanks to Marianne and Steve for their years of service through action and for lending their voices to this podcast. To WEEN's Executive Director Marnie Jackson and our board for their leadership. Special thanks to Whidbey musician and WEEN board member Nathaniel Talbot for letting us use his track Intuition from the album Animal, available on Bandcamp.
Did you say it wasn't proper? Did you stand out on the track? You were quiet just like mice. Now you say we aren't nice. Well, if that is freedom's price,